Hey, what's up, good movie lovers? This is the Movie Preview Critic, and welcome to Movie Night. Since it is Halloween weekend, tonight's selection is M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening. It's definitely not the scariest choice for a movie to watch on Halloween, but it might be one of the most entertaining, in a guilty pleasure, I can't believe it's so bad kind of a way. Actually, it might be kind of scary, especially for M. Night, because based on the box office numbers and the critical reception, it's probably going to affect the future of his career in a not so great way. So go ahead and put the DVD in the player. It's going to boot up and should start with the red attention sign, giving you the warning not to duplicate it and pirate the movie. After that should come up with the message regarding the commentary and how 20th Century Fox and all the affiliates aren't reflected and tied into the views expressed in the commentary. After that, the blue rated R screen comes up. And just to note, this was a big deal in the advertising of this movie, that this was M. Night Shyamalan's first R-rated film. So we'll talk about that as the movie goes along. Next up, a preview is going to start. It should be for the X-Files, at least it is on the DVD that I have. So just go ahead and hit the menu button, and hopefully it doesn't play a trick and take you to more previews. It actually will go to the main menu screen. And there's the main menu with the people standing in the park. Go ahead and hit play. And the 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment logo comes up. And just to make a quick note here, if I go quiet for a couple seconds here and there, 10, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, more than likely it just means I'm gathering some thoughts and figuring out what to say next, or just enjoying what's going on. So just to make sure we're all in sync, the 20th Century Fox light swirling and intro classical kind of music is on the screen right now. And if I ever get caught up into some thoughts and kind of go off base in terms of what's being shown on the screen at the moment, don't worry, I'll circle back and keep you up to date on what I'm seeing so that we're all on the same page here in the same moment. So I have the UTV Motion Pictures. I've never seen the UTV logo before. Might indicate that M. Night needed a little extra financing for the film. Right now the Spyglass Entertainment logo is coming up. It's always interesting to pay attention to the beginning of a movie when the production companies are being listed, because it's a good indicator of just how much money the production needed. Usually if it's just one production company, it indicates a little kind of a level of confidence in the project. If you see a lot of production companies, it means that one company wasn't confident enough, wasn't sure enough in the project, and many companies gave a little bit of money instead of one financer just giving everything. So we have 20th Century Fox distributing and Spyglass and UTV producing. And we have the intro here with the ominous clouds in the sky here, foreshadowing what's going to be happening, giving us this sense of uneasiness and environmental terror to come. Score here I like a lot. It's by James Newton Howard. Most recently, he's probably best known for co-composing with Hans Zimmer the Batman Begins and the Dark Knight score. So he's definitely got some skills, and he's been working with M. Night on his films since 1999 when M. Night did his breakout blockbuster The Sixth Sense. Having the same composer kind of helps keep a similar mood to a lot of the films that a director will make. Just to mention, Tak Fujimoto right now just came up on the screen as the cinematographer. One of his more celebrated and famous jobs was on Silence of the Lambs. So M. Night's definitely got some good talent in place here. Quality cinematographer, quality composer, and then M. Night here writing, producing, and directing. Maybe along with Tyler Perry, two director, producer, writers who are not afraid to claim as much credit as the screen will allow them to. In a good way. I mean, if you got the skills, why not just put your name out there? Alright, so it opens up here, Central Park. The two girls on the bench here. M. Night definitely knows how to set the mood for his films, and I really like the way this one opens up. It's probably the quickest opening to any of his films in terms of just getting right to what the problem, what the threat of the movie's going to be. Ah, the wind. We'll be talking about the wind a lot in this movie. And we have the guy walking backwards over there. I like how yeah, that's a great shot right there. Very cool. So far really promising. It's just like what's going on here? I'm kind of freaked out, definitely interested. There was, I think, like a Time magazine article back after The Sixth Sense came out, right before Unbreakable, that talked about how M. Night was going to be the next Spielberg and how M. Night admitted to really looking up to Spielberg. I mean, who doesn't if you want to make movies? And if you're just a movie fan, he's responsible for so many classic, memorable images that we all have stuck in our heads whenever we think about the movies. So M. Night definitely he studied Spielberg well and he has that talent. Ooh, bloodiness right there. That's some of the rated R for M. Night coming in. The woman stabs herself on the bench. But he's definitely learned by watching Spielberg how to capture and create just like these nice images that, well, let's call them trailer moments. Just they're very memorable and we know they just stick in our minds. And the rotating camera here, the guys at work. Great shot right there. Just you don't know what that is, but you do know what that is in terms of what fell in the background. And it's a construction worker that jumped off the top of the building. So this mystery starts unveiling itself nice and slow, scene by scene, and we're all kind of just thinking, okay, what's going on here? And I like how this slowly builds, and the music is really adding to this whole thing, really setting the mood. It's maybe a little bit fast, but it's definitely giving you the sense of like increasing impending doom. And this is a great shot with the dumpster, just a lot more bodies falling here. Nice circling camera, and then we're gonna have the tilt up here. That's really great. I like that. That's a great shot. I mean, this is music's a little bit overpowering, but definitely a great shot. It just really gets you into the story. Okay, now here is when it gets kind of comical. So Mark Wahlberg is the teacher asking a high school class their theory of why honeybees are disappearing. As if there's like some scientific genius in the crowd who's gonna throw out something amazing. That's an interesting term. Bodies. I guess bees. If bees died, what do you find? You find a bee body? A bee corpse? That term always struck me. It's kind of a goofy comment. it's a funny moment. It's M. Night trying to find humor within a serious or soon to be serious and grave situation. It works. I'm a big fan of M. Night, and I like how he always tries to find, and does find, successfully these funny moments within these horrific slash suspenseful terrorific kind of moments and scenes in his past films. So here's the theme of the movie, kind of the message, quote unquote message of the film in terms of you can't explain everything that happens in nature. There's forces at work that we can't understand, which is what's going to be going on in the rest of the film. And what did the scene accomplish? Just really focusing on Mark Wahlberg's character. I don't even remember his teacher's name in this movie. That's kind of a sign that when you don't know the main character's name, they're just kind of bland and not all that interesting. Not a good thing. Again, think about your favorite films. More than likely, you know all the names of all the major characters in your favorite films. That's because their personalities are large, and more than likely, we get access into what they're feeling and what they want in the movie, what they're striving for. I like this theme music here, this kind of cello-y, deep, deep little drone. I remember this actor here, this principal actor from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Cameron, right? Ferris's best friend, Cameron. He was also in Speed, one of the people on the bus in Speed. This kind of weird moment. So he tells the students to stop for a minute and then doesn't say anything. What did he want to tell them? That's a great quote by Einstein right there. If all the bees were gone, people would only have 4 years left on the planet. Which is actually a real problem. It's actually going on, and it's not something invented just for the film. And it's kind of coincidental that there was an X-Files trailer at the beginning of this DVD. Because for you X-Files fans, if you remember the first film 10 years ago, had a little subplot conspiracy thing where bees were disappearing, but then they were going to be used to deliver some sort of smallpox or something. So it's just funny that this movie's dealing with a similar idea. And we have the trailer for the second X-Files film on this DVD. So still establishing what's going to be going on in the film. We've got the people canceling school, going back to their homes. Great start, those first 3 minutes with the park and the construction workers falling off the roof. That was really engrossing, and now we kind of go to our main character. And I think as an audience member, I'm always looking to figure out why do I want to bond with this main character? Why do I want to be on their side? Why do I want to root for them throughout the rest of this movie? I'm glad to see that John Leguizamo is still working and appearing in films. In the late 80s to early mid 90s, there was really this huge stand up comedy boom, and John Leguizamo was one of the comedians to come to the forefront, become really popular. And he was pretty raw and cutting edge, so if anyone's into like George Lopez or Carlos Mencia, definitely check out some older John Leguizamo comedy. It's pretty funny. The human relationships in M. Night movies always tend to be between the wife and the husband, some kind of marital problem, or one of them have died. So in Signs, you have Mel Gibson as the preacher husband who's lost a wife. In Sixth Sense, you have Bruce Willis dies and his wife is left alive, but we're kind of left to believe that the whole movie it's the reverse situation. Unbreakable, which is my favorite M. Night film, has probably the best relationship out of all of his movies where Bruce Willis is kind of feeling unfulfilled and he's married his wife when they were younger, kind of out of obligation, and now he's searching for some meaning and destiny in life. And she's trying to save the marriage a little bit stronger and more emphatically than he is. And then they have a kid. So there's a lot of great relationships in that movie. And in all his movies in general. One great thing about M. Night is that he tries to focus on the people in his film and not the special effects or the objective, the objects, the monsters, the creatures, that kind of stuff. He's really involved in what the people are feeling. Sometimes he takes a little bit too far. For instance, in Signs, I kind of wish he would have showed a little bit more of the alien invasion. In Signs, it always felt like you were watching the boring part of War of the Worlds. So somewhere War of the Worlds is going on, but for some reason this movie channel is tuned to this farmhouse, and we're seeing this relationship between brothers and kids and the father and his grief for his wife that died. So sometimes M. Night goes in these directions that aren't the most entertaining for an audience, but they are pretty daring for a filmmaker. Like, hey, I'm going to do an alien invasion film, but I'm going to focus on people at a farmhouse. This is a good scene here in the train station where they find out more information about what they think is a terrorist toxin attack on people. I think this is the same train station used in Unbreakable when Bruce Willis's character realizes he has a power and he walks in with his hands open and he starts touching other people and seeing their sins or their crimes that they've committed. Now, Zoe Deschanel, I don't really know what's going on with her performance in this movie. I can't really tell if she's hamming it up and playing it kind of campy or if this is just some kind of unique character she's trying to portray, but her character is probably the goofiest out of everybody. Her reactions just seem out of sync, like they shot the movie out of order and she couldn't keep the continuity going between the emotions. It just feels really unbalanced at times. But then that goes for Mark Wahlberg's character as well. Normally, Mark Wahlberg's a pretty solid actor. He's really fought hard to establish a level of respectability, especially after his early mid 90s music days known as Marky Mark. But Boogie Nights and other films have really shown that he has talent. It's just in this film, their reactions to everything are so strange and, I don't know, not melodramatic, but they're just a little bit absurd. So we're about 15 minutes into the movie, and aside from those first 3 minutes in the park and at the construction site, we haven't seen much of this terrorist attack, people going crazy and killing themselves action. There has been some footage on the news kind of exploring, well, could this be? So that's pretty interesting, but watching just the character interaction here, I have to think, oh boy, it's going to be a long time before we see more action, more interesting kills, more genre set pieces. M. Night's films recently have acquired a reputation of being slow. It almost feels like M. Night knows how to create 5 or 6 major trailer moments that get you really interested in the movie, and then when you show up, you find out that all those trailer moments were the most exciting parts, and in between everything, you have these character dramas going on. Which, again, isn't a bad thing, but if it's the only thing, and if they're not interesting enough, then you're just like, okay, what's going on? Why am I here? Where's the entertainment? Now here we have the wind rustling in the trees and the policeman with the taxi driver. So the people stop again, and we know what's going to happen. They're going to walk backwards, speak some gibberish, and then they're going to kill themselves. Now, it's interesting enough to see the way that people start offing themselves here. This is actually a good shot. Here on the street, the policeman just shot himself. Now, the taxi cab driver is going to get out, pick up the gun, and shoot himself. And then we're going to follow the gun where we just see her legs, which is a really cool shot. We stay on this level angle, and it's very cinematic. This guy walks a couple feet here, and he's out. But it's almost like, okay, and hit your mark. Okay, start walking towards the camera. You can kind of feel it's a little too stagey. It's a little too, this it doesn't feel like a camera got placed in the middle of a happening and you're just kind of capturing the chaos of what's going on. It was a little bit too, okay, hit your mark in 3, 2, 1, and you hit your mark in 2 seconds. A little bit too stagey, but very effective. It's very stylized. But again, great images. It looks very cool on a 70-foot screen. But at this point, you got to start wondering, okay, so is the pattern of this movie basically going to be drama between Mark Wahlberg and Zoe Deschanel, and then you cut to people walking, stopping, walking backwards, and then killing themselves in some interesting kind of way? The people killing themselves almost becomes kind of like a reason that we would go to the Saw movies now, where each Saw installment, we're just looking for the most creative and twisted way that people are going to be put in a trap and have their lives threatened. The happening is starting to become just like that, where now we're going to cut away from this and cut to some other people who get affected by the air, by the pollen, whatever it is, and then we're going to be like, okay, how are these people going to kill themselves? I think there's some interesting crappy dialogue coming up on this train scene. Let's take a listen and see if we can pick any Razzie Award worthy dialogue out. This music's a little bit too strong for what's going on. It's like the train just passes by and it's just like dun 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 dun. It's almost trying to force the dramatic feeling on you. Again, James Newton Howard, awesome composer, but it just feels like it's a little bit incongruous. Like it's just trying to force the momentum and the feeling of the movie. M. Night has this pattern in his movies where he kind of leaves like these breadcrumbs of suspense. Scene by scene, we just get these little pieces of tension, and they slowly start to build and give us the bigger picture, which is great filmmaking. I mean, that's how we want to watch a movie. We don't want to know what's going on at the very beginning. We want to just watch scene by scene and try to figure everything out by ourselves. Okay, this scene here, Mark Wahlberg walks up to the conductors, and it's almost like, okay, is he the only one out of all these customers and passengers that have done this? Why are you giving me one useless piece of information at a time? I love that dialogue. Not really, but it's just ridiculous. This conductor's dialogue is way too forced, and it's just way too. I know I'm in a movie, so I need to say this. Where Mark Wahlberg asks him a question, and he can't just give a straightforward answer and say, well, we tried to contact the station up ahead and we're just getting static, or someone's talking gibberish. He has to say it in like the coolest, most creepiest kind of way. So the question is, you know, we've lost contact. With who? And then he has to pause, like he's in a Dracula movie, and he has to say, everyone. I'm surprised the music at that point didn't go like dun 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 dun. So this might be the B-level movie quality that M Night's talking about, but it's pretty much guaranteed that it didn't start out being a B movie. I do like this shot here with the women's bathroom line. You know, you never really see that in movies unless it's a comedy. Just kind of the reality of, if all these people were in this shop, the bathroom is always the place where there's a line and it's chaos. The two most important places during a disaster. Number one, the grocery store, where you see a ton of people online trying to buy the groceries. Number two, people got to relieve themselves, so it's the bathroom. So M. Night's really good about that, kind of just showing like these little aspects of life that we miss or take for granted. That's definitely one of M. Night's talents, just finding these moments and showing us what we already know, but we already forget. And this is a great little scene, actually. This is a great moment between Mark and the little girl. Again, her character's not really memorable. I don't really remember her name. That might just be me. But I know her as sad little girl who loses her mommy and daddy. M. Night has a lot of great moments between adults and kids. One of my favorite scenes, maybe in any movie, is in The Sixth Sense when Haley Joel Osment's in the car with his mom, and there's the accident, and she says, what's going on? And he says, well, someone got hit on her bike. And then his mom says, well, how do you know that? Because she's standing right next to me. And then he goes on to tell her about how her mom is proud of her. That's just such a great scene. So here's another great scene with a kid. And then the mood ring thing. Okay, this scene here on the iPhone is the jump the shark, nuke the fridge moment for this movie. The guy with the lions at the zoo, and his arms are being torn off. it's so, it's so ridiculous. First of all, because it's such an obvious plug for the iPhone. But then it's like just the writing is just like, okay, look what someone just sent me. And it's just this, okay, here's another way that we can have someone kill themselves in a very interesting way. But when you think logically about, okay, the secret of the movie, as we all know, right? We're all listening to this commentary, having seen the movie already. Or actually, you won't even lose anything if you've never seen it, and I tell you this a couple minutes early, but basically, it's the plants, right? All plant life is releasing some sort of pollen toxin that's affecting the neurotransmitters and basically shutting off our self preservation instinct. And beyond that, even telling us now to kill ourselves. So it's like, well, why wouldn't the plants just release a toxic chemical that just kills us? This is the moment when, as an audience member, you really have to fight to keep down the logic part of your brain that starts asking questions. Maybe going into this movie, they should have had plants in the theater releasing a pollen toxin that shut off that logic part of our story brains. Or if they had something pumping through the vents of the theaters that just didn't make us think. I think this movie would be a little more enjoyable from this point forward. This is actually a pretty funny moment how everyone just kind of splits as soon as they hear the bad news and everyone's kind of fighting for themselves, which is a nice kind of undertone message of the movie of how people become once there's a panic, once there's some kind of catastrophe. Everyone basically looks out for themselves. But just quickly getting back to the whole premise of the movie, the whole plot device, if you will, the story device, the reason for it being is that these plants are making us kill ourselves when it would just be more logical and with a guaranteed success rate if the plants just release some sort of pollen cyanide that the minute we breathed it in, we would die. So it's like this whole story is built on basically like a house of cards where once you question the reality of the movie, everything just falls apart. Right now, the movie's about 25 minutes old, and at this point, it should be past any kind of introductory, here's how people are going to kill themselves stage. We already know how it affects people, and we already know what they do to off themselves. So we can pretty much assume that wherever a person got infected, they're going to use something in their surroundings to off themselves. We don't need to see every single instance of when someone kills themselves. But that's what's going to be going on here because there's no sustained dramatic conflict from this point on. The hardest part of any movie, or of any screenplay to write, is the second act, because that's where you need to have the main character and the opponent well established and fighting for basically 60 to 80 minutes of the remainder of the movie. So if you don't have a strong opponent, you're going to come up with just other things the character needs to do to keep the time going past. More than likely, it's not really going to be interesting because you don't have those elements of drama established. So here we're just at the 30-minute mark, just approaching it, and classically that's really the step into Act 2, where Act 1 is all set up. You meet the main character, you meet the window reflective character, kind of this confession cam character where the main character tells them how they feel about things, and through this window character, this reflective character, we, the audience, are gaining insight into the main character and we're bonding with them and the window character at the same time. And then after that, you need the opponent. You need that person. Usually it's a person. It's most effective when it's a person. But in sort of like this environmental kind of thriller slash here would be action movie, which is very similar, let's say, to The Day After Tomorrow, where that was also about global warming, and the opponent in that movie is the environment, right? So it's a snowstorm, it's the freezing weather, it's the water. So when you have something inhuman like that, it's more of a challenge to keep it interesting. Now here there's this weird kind of slow motion moment where John Leguizamo's looking at his daughter and Mark Wahlberg in the distance as he goes off in the car. Slow motion, trying to hold on to that emotion of the moment, trying to make us feel what he's feeling. It works, but it kind of doesn't. It just feels a little bit awkward for this film. And we have the nuclear power plant smokestacks in the background. So you can really respect M. Night for the message of the movie and what he's trying to do. Again, how do you make an interesting, engaging movie about global warming and humans destroying their environment and thereby destroying themselves? So that philosophical idea about the more we pollute our planet, the more we destroy ourselves, is shown here in a very physical, filmable way, where now the environment is making us do what we're already doing to it and ourselves. But as any producer or cutthroat agent might say, if you want to send a message, use Western Union. Message movies don't always make for the most entertaining movies. And the best way to usually get a message across is never to say it. Here, it's kind of mentioned, but just the situation is really just kind of pounding you over the head with it. And here comes another ridiculous moment. We have John Leguizamo in the car, in the Jeep, with everyone going to Princeton searching for his wife. And we're going to see that it has also been infected. So his mathematical calculations proved wrong, and more than likely his wife has become a victim. Now here we go again. The cool images, right? So we're into Act 2, and we see landscapers have gone up into the trees and hung themselves. Again, you just kind of have to laugh a little bit because why wouldn't this pollen toxin just say, okay, kill yourself, and people just swallow their tongue or stop breathing or hold their breath? They have to think of the most creative and, most importantly, the most visually appealing and memorable kind of ways to kill yourself. It seems like the only characters that I remember from this movie are the ones that verbalize some sort of interest or trait. So we have John Leguizamo's character as the math teacher, and he's really interested in statistics. So you kind of remember this moment. And again, another nice human little moment here where he's trying to calm someone down. So he uses what is unique to him, which is this knowledge of math. And that's a great scene. But here we have another goofy moment coming up where there is like a quarter-size slit in the top of the Jeep, and that air is going to infect all of them and make them kill themselves. Come on, seriously? What about the vents for the air conditioner that go into the car? This car is not airtight, so the air is going to be coming in from everywhere. I do like this visual though. The car stops just like people stop, right? Now I don't know why the people wouldn't stop and the car would just keep idling. This is actually a cool moment when it just speeds up and the guys fly out of the windows. But again, it falls in that category of, okay, let's just think of more interesting ways people are going to off themselves in this movie. And then, of course, John Leguizamo's character is the only one to survive out of that group. Maybe he had his seatbelt on. Who knows? We didn't see it. But this is probably done because we've had a lot of screen time with him already, and his death will have a little more emotional impact than these strangers who just had this cool kind of visual of popping out of the windows. This is kind of creepy though. He just looks for a piece of glass and he starts cutting himself. That's pretty freaky. So this is kind of like a play off of just Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, this zombie infection, 28 Days Later. A contamination story where people's behavior is affected in horrific, terrorizing kind of ways. Here it doesn't totally work because a lot of parts are pretty laughable, because the logic of the story has a lot of holes. Even in Night of the Living Dead, we're not told 100% why the dead started coming back to life. We're given some radio quotes here and there of what the theories are, and it's just enough to not make us not believe. We suspend enough disbelief to believe. Unfortunately, here, there's too much information, or the theories presented are just a little bit absurd because then we think about, oh, well, what if that really happened in real life? Could that happen in real life? And once you start doing that, you just kind of are taken out of the movie and it becomes an inadvertent comedy. A quote unquote B movie, which is kind of a misrepresentation of what a classical B movie really was. Back in the olden days of theatrical releases, there was usually a double bill, a double feature for films. So the A movie was the main reason you were going to the theater that night. It had the big stars and it had the great story, the huge production designs, and the bigger budget. Because going to the theater back in those days, it was like a full night out. You'd have the newsreels, some short cartoons. It was like a 4 or 5 hour adventure. People would get dressed up. Theaters had like 2 or 3 thousand seats. It was truly an event. So that B movie was just a little double feature, usually lower in budget, and the not so well known actors. And because of the small budgets, while the stories might have had great ideas, they weren't done very well. Many times the special effects were pretty cheesy, the acting wasn't very good, and the writing, the dialogue was pretty horrible. So that's what M. Night might be referring to, is that inadvertently his film feels like a B movie, but when you look at it, you've got an A-list director, you've got an A-list star, there's a pretty big budget, and it's being released by a major studio during the summer, being touted as kind of an event picture. Again, using that whole M. Night Shyamalan's first R-rated movie and from the director of Sixth Sense and Signs. I always wonder how come they never mention all of the director's movies. How come they don't mention Unbreakable and Lady in the Water and The Village? Well, even though they made decent money, they weren't critical hits and people don't remember those, so they only use what's popular. They don't give you the whole picture in those little headlines. And that's also a sign of a director's future fortunes. If their newest movie is referencing movies that came out 10 or 20 years ago, that means they've made some recent pictures that have either bombed or have critically failed. Well, that's not true. Even if it's a critical hit, it's more important to mention a box office hit than it is a critical hit. So here, almost 38 minutes or so into the movie, about 37 and a half, survivors are meeting up at a crossroads and they find out that every direction has victims. So there's no safe place to go in their cars. This is another funny part where this guy, right, the environmentalist or the plant talker lover, who also loves hot dogs, and who knows why that's even a major part of the movie, but coincidentally, there's a woman in the crowd who has a cell phone who is talking to someone in Princeton, the exact place where John Leguizamo went to look for his wife. So, and I think his dialogue is even, "Isn't that where your friend went?" It just happened like 4 minutes ago. We don't need to be reminded of it in the dialogue again. But still, we have more of this people killing themselves going on, so we're going to hear over the phone. Actually, it's pretty interesting because it just really shows you the power of cinema and how the audience really needs to be an active participant. Because here, we don't see what this person over the phone is going to do. We hear just enough cues to get the complete painted picture in our mind. So that's really well done. Filmmaking is really effective when sound is utilized to its like utmost potential. This is kind of goofy with the speakerphone. It's kind of spooky. It reminds me a lot of the Lost premiere, the very first episode, where they put this message on speaker. They had the walkie-talkie, and it was like the repeating message, and it's just so creepy. They think that it's like a live person, but then it turns out to be an automated message from like 16 years ago. But again, we're seeing the emotional impact on how this event is affecting everyone. And now this is an important moment. We get to see how the girl is reacting to the knowledge that most likely her mom and dad are dead. The music effectively cues that emotion, what we're supposed to be feeling, that this is kind of like a little girl thinking about her parents' music. I don't know if the kids would be so well behaved and together in this kind of situation, but all the kids in M. Night films, starting from Wide Awake into Sixth Sense, Signs, Unbreakable, right? I guess there seems to be kids in all of his movies. They always seem to be a little bit too wise and a little bit too adult. It's kind of cool on screen, but after a while, it's just like, give us a brat. Give us someone who's impulsive and can't control themselves and is kind of annoying. Alright, here again, a nice tender moment. And Zoe Deschanel is a reflection of us in the audience, right? If she's crying, that's a cue for us to cry. The music also in this moment effectively hitting those notes, trying to squeeze every tear from our eyes that it can. Here we have more theory of what's causing this event. This hot dog eating environmentalist is going to explain it. I do like the casting. M. Night really casts interesting, actually normal looking people. That really helps in the believability of a story. I don't know about you, but I live in a major city, Chicago, and walking around every day, you don't see models every 2 feet. When you watch any show on TV or most movies, everyone's a perfect 10, like they should just be on the cover of Cosmo and GQ. So here we have actually real people. Really brings you into a movie. This army guy seems to be doing like his version of Adam Sandler. Imagine if Happy Gilmore joined the army, kind of like a Gomer Pyle. It's pretty funny. Again, each character feels distinct enough, but they're not memorable enough. I do like how he took this non cliche route of the army guy isn't just like some automatic commander, like, follow me and I know what we're gonna do. He's just like a nervous private that managed to survive his base going crazy, and he's just as scared as the rest of us. So those are nice little touches. Again, I don't want this to feel like it's just like a rip-on M. Night Shyamalan hour and a half fun time. I'm a fan of M. Night. He definitely has talent. It's not an accident that he's made as many movies as he had. His movies make money. He has a strong fan base. So he's definitely a good filmmaker, but for this one, he really stretched it a little bit too far, and it just doesn't work. So at about 42 minutes into the movie, the next major piece of information is revealed. The plants are killing people in large groups. So stay off the main roads, don't go to any major cities, and everything will be alright. Here we have the second most ridiculous moment of the movie. There was the guy in the zoo getting his arms torn off. Then there was the slit in the Jeep. That was kind of absurd. On second thought, this one actually is the most ridiculous moment in the movie. Just to mention The Day After Tomorrow again, there was that classically ridiculed moment when the freezing ice air was coming into the library and Jake Gyllenhaal was running from it, and the only way to escape it was to close the door. Everyone made fun of that movie for doing that. Well, here in a couple minutes, a similar sort of horribleness is going to happen when they have to outrun the wind. So we'll wait in just a moment. So here's more people offing themselves. Again, because there's no strong immediate conflict, this movie's just stuck in a pattern. We follow Mark Wahlberg, he meets characters, he continues to try to escape, and then people stop, walk backwards, speak gibberish, and off themselves in interesting ways. Again, the filmmaking here is good. It's using the strengths of cinema. Any movie is really well done when it engages the audience as much as possible. So here, in just a second, it's going to cut away from what's going on, and we're going to hear Mark Wahlberg and his friends hear everything, and that again allows us to imagine what's going on. It's always more powerful for the audience to imagine things and to be involved in creating the images instead of being spoon-fed them non-stop. So this is a great shot right here where we see the gun being unholstered, and we see Nature Bill's reaction to what's going to go on, and we have the hand holding, a nice little bonding moment, and we have the gunshot, and then the reaction. That's all really well done. And again, it's rated R, there's some blood, but a lot of the violence is off screen. For a great example of this, if you haven't seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from the 70s, not the remake that was recently done, but the original, that one's classically known as just this horrific, mentally terrorizing horror movie. But if you go back and watch it, there's really no blood on screen. Everything is just implied. It's just really quick cuts, and you never really see any kind of torture or anything horrible. It's all in our minds, and that's what really works well in cinema. This is actually an interesting moment here where Zooey Deschanel is kind of berating Mark Wahlberg to do something, and it would be a great opportunity for him to have some sort of character growth, but it's never been established that this is one of his weaknesses. A second ago, Nature Bill was saying that he seems really resilient, so where does this panic come from? And is that the reason why they're having problems in the marriage? There's a mention earlier that he wants to have kids and she wants to wait, and that might be creating some of the tension, and that's actually the note that the movie ends on. It just seems so forced and artificial. By the way, while this scene of Mark trying to figure everything out, the gunshots are constantly going off in the background. That's such a great move. It just really works because we're sitting there listening to him trying to figure this thing out. And in the background we know person after person is walking up to the gun, picking it up, and shooting themselves. It's really great filmmaking. I mean, hats off to M. Night for that. But if we saw it, it would kind of be a repeat of the scene on the street where the police officer took the gun, shot himself, and the taxi driver did it, and then some woman walked up and did the same thing when we just saw her legs. So similar sort of device, but here really used well because it's multiple shots and we never see it, we just constantly hear it. Okay, here's the goofiest. Oh, the wind is coming after them. Filmmaking wise, it's pretty impressive that they got this shot. It doesn't look like it's CGI. It looks like they actually went out onto these fields with these big wind machines and made it happen. So again, having a great cinematographer can help you. So Tak Fujimoto, hats off to him. He really made it happen. And it's a cool idea, but it just doesn't work. Because the first question I'm going to ask is, how are the trees causing wind? Unless I missed something in science class, wind is created in the atmosphere and through jet streams. It doesn't really have anything to do with trees or grass or leaves or. I mean, it's not like the trees are swaying and pushing their branches together trying to create some sort of forced little wind. And I don't think these are the same trees from Lord of the Rings where they have mouths and they can kind of blow out some air or something. So this whole running away from the wind is just, come on. It's bad. Yeah, it's horrible. Because now the question becomes, all right, they were in a smaller group, so the wind and the pollen toxin stuff took out the larger group, but because there was only 5 or 6 of them here, it skipped over them, right? So Mark says nothing happened, and we get the next piece of information. Oh, that might be the greatest line of the movie right there. Can this really be happening? Yes, it is, Mark. You are in this movie. Maybe you need to read the script and not just trust your agent, because they're looking at the paycheck. This is really happening. You are in this movie, and it's a little over halfway done. By the way, just to mention this, a friend of mine, let's call him Uncle C, watched this movie recently, and when he was referring to the deaths, he said that people were getting happened. So that's the term. Whenever anyone dies from this event in the happening, they just got happened. So Uncle C, you're getting credit for your terminology. So we'll try to use that whenever anyone gets happened in the rest of the movie. Alright, so Mark's in the car right now looking for a survivor, looking for a weapon or something. But this is another frustrating moment. It's like, okay, the car has energy, the car has power. So he turns on the radio and he starts to get information. But for some reason, let's just turn it off after 5 seconds of info. It's even going to be more ridiculous because in just a second after this fake house model scene, there's going to just coincidentally be a radio hanging from a fence, and he's going to desperately want to hear information from that. But while he had the chance on a clear, static-free radio in a car, he decided just to turn it off for some reason. Oh, he's looking for a map. That's what was going on. I had forgotten that part. He's looking for a map. And he didn't listen to information. It's always frustrating when characters don't do what you would do. You know, like you have the most basic thought. The classic example is when you're watching an action movie and a character who's obviously running out of bullets kills some other bad guys who have all these weapons on him, and he just runs past them. He never picks up any extra ammo. So frustrating. Just give us a little bit. Give us a little bit of reality, a little bit of logic, and we're happy. Coming up is another great M. Night Little moment. At first, I was laughing when Mark is in this office and he sees a tree kind of rustling and he's gonna talk to it. I was like, man, this is really getting ridiculous. But it turns out it's just another fun little moment because the tree is plastic. But still, it is funny, but it's funny on 2 levels because you have obviously the nice twist where it's a plastic plant, but if it wasn't a plastic plant, he's trying to bargain with a tree if it was real. It's like, come on, what kind of story are we into at this moment? So right idea, but it it still doesn't work. But this is another good example of M. Night taking us into places we haven't gone before. He's really got a good skill of putting us in interesting environments, and I can't remember the last time I saw a model house in a movie, especially in this kind of contaminant, would-be zombie kind of a horror movie. This is a great idea. But it still doesn't make up for the fact that there isn't a mounting sense of tension And that really just comes from the fact that there isn't like a cohesive logic to the overall threat. At least in The Day After Tomorrow, the global warming made sense. You had the superstorms, they created these tornadoes and rising tides and all this kind of stuff. And it just made sense that, okay, this supercell freeze thing is going to come and anything outside is going to die. So you got to seek shelter, and that's the enemy, that's the threat. Here, it almost seems like the characters are voicing M. Night's process of trying to figure out the exact logic of this event or this happening. This is a nice little funny moment with the fake wine glass. But it just feels like M. Night didn't have it fully thought out before camera started rolling. So you get this dialogue, which really happens a lot in scripts that aren't 100% there. The dialogue coming out of the character's mouths will reflect the insecurities in the story structure. In a lot of ways, I like this little new twist where now they're afraid not only of the wind and the plants, but they're afraid of other people. And here's more of the same pattern, where we're going to get a cool visual of how people off themselves. And here it's pretty funny. Two groups coming together. Look, a lot of people start showing up. And you know what that means. They're about to get happened. And this is so ridiculous. This guy, okay, let's just imagine this. The pollen, you breathe it in, and for some reason this message goes off in your head. Look for the nearest thing to kill yourself with, even if you have to start a lawnmower and then wait for it to turn around and then lay down in front of it and let it run you over because it looks really disturbing and cool. And this is M. Night Shyamalan's first R-rated movie, so we need to have some blood. I really wish the characters would have started talking to each other and saying, "Oh my god, did you see that guy? He just got happened." It's just so absurd. For some reason, the trees and the grass are gonna allow small amounts of people to live, but not large amounts. I guess they haven't figured out that all it takes to make more people are just two people. Why didn't this pollen threat just take out all the guys or all the girls and just leave one side of the population, or only leave a couple guys or a couple girls? It's just really not that thought out. Here's a nice little funny moment again. M. Night's good at these little character scenes where the kids are asking him about the relationship with his wife. Oh my god, okay, here we go. Here's the ridiculous radio. Maybe it's the same radio from Signs, but it's hanging on a little wooden fence here, and he's so desperate to hear what's going on, even though less than 10 minutes ago he had a perfectly good working radio in a car. So it just makes the motivation for this scene absurd. And it's just starting to feel like these characters are just in motion just to get to a point so they can see more people get happened. This movie really has a similar structure to Signs, where in Signs you have the family on the farmhouse, and every couple minutes you get a crop circle. So the movie starts out, again, interestingly enough, with the crop circle. Oh my god, what is this? Who did it? It's a prank. We're introduced to the personal dramas within the characters. And then 10 minutes go by and another crop circle. And then more character development. You got the brother, the ex-baseball player who came back after Mel Gibson's wife died. And then you have the kids who miss their mom, and Mel Gibson isn't a preacher anymore, and he's neglecting everyone, and he's filled with hate and all this kind of stuff. But for about an hour and 20 minutes of Signs, all you're getting are just every 10 minutes or so these little events, these little crop circles, these little bits of exciting information that get you all pumped up. You're like, okay, this is what I came to see. I want to know what's going to happen next. And then it slows down again. You just get caught up in these characters' lives. And on a lot of levels, it's interesting, but on another level, it's like, well, how come you're not following through with this bigger story, with this bigger threat that keeps being promised, and ultimately we never get to see? And then finally, when we do see it, it's just ridiculous. It's one alien that shows up in the house, and the girl's been putting the water everywhere because some invisible force has been telling her to put them there, or instinctively, impulsively making her put them there, because it's going to come into play later, because the brother who used to be a baseball player is going to have to swing away. So again, M. Night is really great at making these trailer moments, these memorable images that make us want to see the movie. Signs is the second biggest grosser for him behind Sixth Sense. And Sixth Sense had the ultimate trailer moment where you have the little kid saying, I see dead people. And that's just enough. Boom, we're into the theater, we're there. In the end, it just seems like M. Night is like a tease. Watching M. Night Shyamalan films gives me cinematic blue balls. The trailers are like the dress of a movie that's kind of hiked up knee high, and it gives you a good promise of what's to come when it gets hiked up a little bit more. Then when you pay the money for the full feature, you're pretty disappointed with what's revealed. Or more importantly, what's not revealed. This scene at the house is pretty interesting. First, because you have the little girl swinging on the bench, which is connected to the tree. So you kind of think, well, if trees are out to get people, wouldn't they be pissed that someone's swinging from their branch? The rest of the scene here embodies the second idea of this film, first being that humans are destroying the environment, and the second being that when humans are forced into a mode of survival, it's basically winner take all, survival of the fittest. So this embodies that moment. Unfortunately, it gets pretty laughable here where Mark Wahlberg's character is just coming off as way too nice, and you never really get a strong sense of the kind of person that he is. And then these two teenage kids just kind of go into let's get tough mode. And you know what's going to happen. You know that they're going to anger these people and that there's guns involved. And surprisingly, I didn't think that these two would get shot, but M. Night, having the R rating, decides to go there. It's pretty shocking, pretty raw. So in a way, we've seen it in other movies, and it's kind of a shock here. I do like the way that this is filmed right here, where the gun comes out of the window here, and you just know what's going to happen. And of course, another great example, they're not going to show it. You know, you see the flash, and you imply what's going to go on. You'll see the aftermath with the blood on the kid's head. But it's kind of a sickening little moment. You're just like, wow, that just really happened, and no one was under the control of the trees. So on the one hand, there could be like a little commentary going on here that you don't even need some sort of toxic terrorist tree attack on people. People are going to kill themselves. It's been said in 1,000 other stories, and it'll keep on being said in 1,000 more. But here it just gets ridiculous. The music gets so melodramatic, and Zooey Deschanel's reaction, we have to protect Jess. All of a sudden, that's become her mission. Where earlier didn't even want to hold her hand. This music is so over the top. Again, great composer, but just maybe being directed a little bit wrong or just trying to create something that isn't there. So we get more information through the TV, and then a pretty funny moment with the two older ladies knitting while wearing gas masks, which brings up another great point. The first order of business should be to get some kind of protective masking so you don't have to breathe this stuff in. The second thing that this brings up is an idea that I forgot to mention earlier, is that when you see that this thing makes you kill yourself, why don't you just have someone tie you up? Just lay on a bed, have your arms and legs tied to the posts so that you can't move. But then again, if this desire to kill yourself is so strong, you'll probably just hold your breath or swallow your tongue or just shake your head until your brain separates or whatever ridiculous sort of solution comes up. It just would have been great if the characters in the movie would have been asking out loud the same questions we're asking. This is actually an interesting moment here where we kind of go across the country linked by the newscast to see how different types of people are responding to this event. And it's mainly an East Coast thing, and that's where M. Night likes to stage his movies, in Philadelphia, in and around Philadelphia. The movie's about an hour old now, and there hasn't been much progression in terms of conflict. There hasn't been a lot of conflict between the main characters, at this point being Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel. We've gotten a couple brief glimpses into their marriage or what their marital problems would have been, but a really big missed opportunity comes into play here. And that's not allowing the characters to explore their relationship through this event, through this conflict, through this crisis. To use one of my favorite films as an example, in Die Hard, you have John McClane and Holly Gennaro. They're on the verge of divorce, they've been separated, and he's going to Nakatomi Plaza to visit her and try to mend the relationship. Before he can do that, so called terrorists, what we learn later are just basically bank robbers, take her hostage, and now John McClane has to find a way to free her and everyone else and stop the bad guys. What's great is that the issues of the marriage are never dropped. The key to that is the window character, the reflection character, that person through whom we have access to the emotions of the main character. And in Die Hard, it's Al Powell. John McClane talks to Al Powell on the CB non-stop. And what does he talk about? He talks about the terrorists, he talks about how it's affecting him and what he has to do, but it mainly deals with how he feels about a failed marriage, how he'll never get the chance to rectify it. And that's what connected us, the audience, so strongly to John McClane. Here, this is missing. It's set up early, where you have Mark and Zoe in a dying marriage, and once this crisis starts, you expect them to be like this bickering or fighting couple. Just think back to like any kind of holiday parties or any situations where you've seen a married couple or even just people who are dating and the relationship isn't going so well. Even in a supposedly festive environment like a party, if something happens, these people do not drop the issues that they have between one another. They continuously come out. Now it seems here that the main issue would be the kid, that Mark wants to have a child, Zoe isn't ready, and it's no coincidence that John Leguizamo and his wife have died, thereby leaving their daughter in the care of Zoe. So this should force her to address these issues that she's having with not wanting to have a child. Maybe she doesn't want to have the responsibility. Maybe something happened to her when she was little in terms of her parents. What exactly is the issue? What is the struggle that's going on within her if she's the major reason that the marriage seems to be stressed? Unfortunately, we don't know because it's never brought up. She never talks to Mark. Mark never talks to her. There's never really any blow up between them. Everyone's kind of this mild-mannered, soft-spoken, bland character. And that's one overall gripe I have with M. Night Shyamalan's movies. All of his characters whisper when they want to be dramatic. Apparently, whispering equals drama. I actually think that if you go back to all of his films and look at the male main characters, they're pretty much all the same in terms of the way they deliver dialogue and the way they react to situations. They're very calm and they talk very slow and very low and they whisper. Whispering must be the way to be serious and try to get Oscar nominations or something because it's a consistent thing. And that's probably why all of M. Night's movies are more memorable for their overall concepts than they are the characters that are involved in them. Let's do a test right now. Let's think of all of M. Night's movies. Imagine you make two columns on a piece of paper. On the right column, you're going to put the main characters, put their names, maybe describe what's unique about them. In the other column on the left, put what was the concept, what was the overall idea, what was the movie about. And more than likely, you're probably going to fill up that left column faster because Sixth Sense, a little kid who can see dead people, and the main character is dead the whole movie. In Signs, you've got the aliens crop circles attacking. In Unbreakable, you've got Bruce Willis as a superhero, and Samuel L. Jackson as the guy who caused it all, as his villain the whole time. In The Village, you've got the idea that these people are really in the present day, and the society has been created to shelter everyone from the horrors of modern day society. In his first feature, Wide Awake, you've got a little kid looking for proof of God, and in the end, God's there the whole time. And Lady in the Water, you've got a lady in the water, and some kind of porcupine monster guy wants to kill her. Now, when you think about the characters, you got the actors, no problem. You've got Bruce Willis twice, you've got Mel Gibson, Joaquin Phoenix, and then Paul Giamatti. Then there's the whole other issue with M. Night, which is the twists. Sixth Sense, and really his first feature, Wide Awake, which also had a twist, which had the first M. Night twist. But Sixth Sense had the most popular twist maybe in movie history. And it really set off a twist craze, where all movies for the next 2 or 3 years had to have some crazy spin of expectations at the end of them. Then there was Unbreakable, where Samuel L. Jackson turned out to be the villain. In Signs, you had the twist with the water and the swing away. And in The Village, it turns out that it's the modern day. The twist of Lady in the Water was that there was no twist. And that's the case here in The Happening. The theory that the plants are the ones doing this to the humans is revealed at about the 40-minute mark. And I'm personally glad that M. Night's gotten away from that, because he's pretty much been trapped by his initial success. And it's got to be frustrating when you release a movie, everyone going in to see the movie's already trying to outthink the twist that you've got planned. M. Night's really in a difficult place because no matter what he does, he's kind of screwed. If the twist is really great, you still get critics who say that they saw it coming, or maybe it was a little bit too unbelievable. If the twist is horrible, well, everyone agrees it's horrible. And then if there's no twist, everyone's saying that you've run out of ideas and you've lost your talent. So it's going to take a couple movies for everyone to get used to M. Night making just linear stories that don't have any crazy twists at the end. But once that happens, the focus now needs to belong to the characters, creating unique, memorable characters that are involved in some dramatic conflict with other characters. This is a real strong key for M. Night's future. On the DVD for Unbreakable, he mentions that movie was kind of an experiment for him, where he wanted to do Act 1 for an entire movie. And it really kind of hampered it at the end, where at the point where Samuel L. Jackson was revealed as the villain, you expected the movie to keep going, because traditionally that's the beginning of Act 2. You know who the villain is, so now the struggle's going to begin. And all you got was that just little paragraph of the cop showed up and arrested him, and David went on to keep fighting crime or accept his new responsibility. So the twist really kind of skewered what is really a great movie. It's basically a dramatic exploration of a superhero. It's basically like, imagine if Superman and Lois Lane had marital problems. So it's a great overall film that's got a bad reputation because of its unsatisfying end. Let's get back to the present moment here and talk about Mark and Zoe and the girl here at this house with the old woman. Again, M. Night definitely has talent, and he really knows how to slowly reveal a character to us. Fortunately, every side character in this film has been more interesting than Mark and Zoe. The Secluded Woman is definitely my favorite character in the film. And there's this great moment that just happened a couple minutes ago, where Mark walked into a bedroom and there was like this doll mannequin of a little girl. And without any dialogue, it really revealed why this woman is a little mentally deranged. And I really like how it was slowly revealed that she is crazy. When you meet her, she seems just like this old, sweet woman who's going to give kids candy and tell you bedtime stories. But there's that scene where she slaps Jess's hand as she's trying to take a cookie, and it just lets you know, uh-oh, something's a little wrong here. Then after that, she's standing in her nightgown in the hallway, talking about how she's freaked out that they're planning to murder her. And then that makes you think, well, is she going to murder them before they get her? And it becomes a great example of, look what happens when you put an opponent in the way of the main character. Conflict automatically comes up, and you get a lot of tension. There's more tension here in the last 10 minutes than there was in the last 30 minutes, because you get tired and bored of this invisible wind pollen toxin threat. It's a lot more effective to see a tangible threat right in front of you. So that scene with the little girl mannequin on the bed really puts the responsibility for the backstory on us, the audience. We're the ones who have to look at that and say, wow, why would this woman have such a weird thing in her house? And for me, I've kind of come up with this idea that, well, her husband's dead and she doesn't appear to have any kids, but judging by what's in that bedroom, it looks like she probably did have a little girl and something happened. Maybe the husband left with the girl, or there was some kind of tragedy and the girl died. It almost feels a little bit like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, where Norman Bates has taken the skeleton of his mother and dressed her up and continues to talk to her at least in his head. So here you can kind of imagine the scene where at night, maybe this woman walks into that room and reads a bedtime story to the mannequin. It's definitely spooky and disturbing, so it's another great example of how M. Night really is a talented filmmaker. It's just here you gotta wonder, how did he get himself in this situation? And there's about 10 to 15 minutes left of the movie, so the stakes need to be raised and the characters have to face a final deadly threat. Unfortunately, that threat violates everything we've just learned over the last hour, because now, apparently, the plants are going to kill you even if you're not in a big group. Just a moment ago, the crazy old secluded woman walked out by her garden, or kind of near the end of the yard, and started walking backwards, and then walked up to the house and started banging her head against the wall, and then banged her head through the glass and died. Automatically, we realize that the threat has now escalated. But again, it's at the expense of logic and at the expense of taking us out of the moment that we're so desperately trying to stay into. We're fighting these questions that keep coming up. We just want to watch the movie and just take it for what it is and not be distracted by this need for rational explanations. But what this woman's death does is pretty much make everything else a moot point. Everything that's come before now makes no sense. Why have the plants now changed their mind and decided to start killing individual people? It might be because the woman was angry. That might be it. But then again, why didn't the trees kill that house full of people that shot those two kids? So you can't really point to any form of logic. And then here there are more laughable moments, starting with the moment when Mark sees the woman die. He takes a blanket and puts it at the bottom of the door so the air doesn't reach his room. But of course, as we all know, doors aren't airtight, houses aren't airtight, so if the plants want to get you, if the trees want to kill you, they're going to do it. You're going to get happened. And across the yard, Zoe and Jess are in that little house, and they just close the window and close the door, and that automatically makes them safe. At this point, we've put up with about an hour and 15 minutes of pretty laughable movie logic. It's getting pretty exhausting constantly reworking the movie logic to kind of fit some sort of form of rational explanation, which in terms of a movie we do need. I think M. Night reached the end of his script and realized what was going on, so he included that scene that was towards the beginning of the movie where Mark is in the class and he asks everyone about the disappearance of the bees, and the conclusion at the end of that scene is that, well, it's an act of nature and it can't be explained. Sometimes there isn't any rational explanation for mysterious occurrences. So that's almost like a get out of jail free card for the movie. That if you remember that scene, whatever happens from that moment on, you don't need to have any kind of reasonable explanation. But just because scientists or just humans can't figure out why something happened doesn't mean that there isn't a logical explanation. It's just that our knowledge at the current moment isn't sufficient enough, and we don't know the right questions to ask, or we don't know the right places to look to get the answers. They're definitely out there, and in a few years or a few hundred years, scientists will crack the many mysteries that exist today. But it looks very doubtful that anyone is going to be able to crack the logical mysteries of this movie. With the screenplay and with the movie that follows, the filmmakers have total control. They have absolute power, so they can take as much time as they need to think things through and make everything make sense. So I don't accept that earlier excuse that, well, it's a natural event and you can't really explain everything all the time. This scene here with the underground pipe that was used during the Civil War, it's interesting. I like the way that it's used, but it, again, feels very forced. And this scene reminds me a lot of the moment in Unbreakable when Bruce Willis and Robin Wright Penn go on a date for the first time in a few years. They've been having marital problems, and in an effort to reignite the fire, they decide to go on a sort of retro first date. And it's a really great little moment, and it's a really well filmed scene. It's basically them at the table, and the camera starts far away and it just slowly dollies in. And the content is really similar to what just went on here, where they're kind of just going over their memories and asking themselves questions that they've never bothered to ask that seem kind of simplistic and obvious. But ultimately, it provides a way to open the door again and to establish some contact. Okay, here's the grand finale. Mark is tired of talking through the pipe in the wall, and he says, I love you, I don't care, I want to see you one last time. Now again, they're both in a safe place, apparently safe enough, even though nothing is airtight and the toxin could still get in. But he decides, you know what, for some reason, I'm just going to walk out there and I'm going to prove to her that I still love her. Even though the whole movie we haven't been talking and we haven't revealed any kind of struggle between us, let's just go outside and see what happens. The music is just swelling so large here. It really is laughable because it doesn't fit. There's no logical reason why this would be the climax. Is the message here that if people love each other, if there's this power of love being felt between the people, that the trees can also feel this and they're not going to kill anyone if there is like this good-hearted nature between them? It's so ridiculous. I mean, the wind's just powerfully just blowing everywhere and the grass and the leaves are rustling. And again, trees and grass don't create wind, so you have to wonder where all that's coming from. But Nature Bill did kind of mention that trees and grass can talk to each other, so maybe all of nature has this secret communication language that they use, and maybe the trees phoned in some wind from the jet stream. So just as it should be, the characters, the emotion of the characters is what is at the center here of the climax. And it's what should have been the focus of the entire movie. The battle between the characters, the emotion between this married couple, and going through this adventure, this journey, this crisis, and coming out the other end stronger and reconnected. And even though technically it's the right ending for these characters, it kind of feels like they won the marathon without really running it. Like they just showed up at the last mile and jumped in the line when no one was noticing, and then they decided to just cross the finish line. We want to see that work from beginning to end. We want to see that struggle throughout the movie, and it was totally absent, and it just showed up here at the climax that, oh, we need to show that we love each other, so let's take the ultimate risk, let's take the ultimate challenge, and walk outside where we know certain death awaits us because now the wind and the pollen and the toxin is targeting everyone. So this ending just really doesn't work. There was no build-up in terms of the logic of the attack, of the happening, and we didn't really know what to expect. All of a sudden it just sort of stopped, and there was this horrible dialogue at the very end when they were on the grass field, and then later they went into the basement where Mark says, "We must have just missed it, or it just ended." It's so sad of a line because throughout the movie, M. Night has shown that he's so good at visually giving us information and allowing us to figure everything out. And here's this moment when we don't know what's going on. We're all sitting here in the audience thinking, okay, why did this attack suddenly stop and how come they didn't die when they went in the field? Did their love really save them? So this line has to be thrown in so that we can understand it because the visuals aren't giving us that information. There isn't enough visually for us to piece the elements together because it makes no sense. Here's the final coda to the attack. We have this expert on TV talking with the TV anchor about the various theories of why this happened and if there will be another attack in the future. So I like this idea. I think it's pretty cool. It's very X-File-y in terms of plants that rapidly evolve their chemistry as sort of a self-defense mechanism. So that actually makes sense. It's just the way that it was used to propel the story didn't make sense, and it should have. And you can kind of sense what's going to happen here. It's like, how is this movie going to end? It didn't end on a twist, but more than likely it's going to end with a new event. So it's going to cut to Paris, and the end is going to be just like the beginning, so it's going to come full circle. But before that end happens, there's this final theory of the scientists that this was just the beginning. This was just a rash, the start, the prelude of something that's going to be bigger. That almost sounds like something a movie studio would have thrown into the end of a movie so that it makes sense for the audience when the sequel is made. Why couldn't this one installment just be the Big Bang? Just have everything in it and not mess around, not just give us a little taste and a little preview of what it could be so that we watch this first part, and when the second part comes out in 2 years, we have to see that because we want to see the really good stuff. That's the problem with a lot of movies today. You never really feel like they end. And that's totally by design because it's really hard to have a definite hit nowadays. Budgets are so high that you need to make a crazy ass amount of money in order to be considered successful. It's kind of like finding this cinematic golden goose that keeps laying these box office bonanza eggs. The unfortunate side effect of trying to create box office hits instead of just letting them organically happen by producing ideas that are original and unique and challenging is that you get these movies that hold back story, that hold back potential. They don't commit 100%. They basically don't fire all the bullets in their gun because they're trying to save some rounds for the future sequels, or so they hope. Taking this idea and applying it to The Happening, we can ask, well, what if this event would have been all over the US or all over the world at the same time? That would have really raised the stakes and the interest in what was going to happen. Who knows what the motivation was? Maybe the producers and the studios wanted to save a worldwide happening for a possible sequel if this was going to be a hit, which we know it turned out to be the opposite. It's pretty much considered a dud. To overuse the play on words, The Happening didn't happen. So the movie ends here with Zooey Deschanel looking at the pregnancy test and smiling because it reads positive. And again, that seems sort of just like a forced ending. It's never really discussed throughout the movie. It's kind of hinted at, and it's in the subtext, which is never brought to the surface until the very end. So this event, this happening, has helped these two characters, Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel, get together, save their marriage, and commit to having a child. Then it cuts to Paris, and the event, the happening, begins again, which kind of almost renders the prelude or the happening that occurred on the East Coast in the United States sort of null and void, because everyone went through that struggle and the suffering kind of for nothing. Now it's going to get interesting again. And what happens? We cut to the credits. Very similar to Unbreakable, where at the end it seems to get even more interesting, and that's what we really want to see. And again, because the logic of the event, of the happening, is never really explored or known, probably because, again, there's that warning early on that it's a natural mystery beyond human comprehension. If that's the case, then this little surprise ending in Paris shouldn't really interest us too much, because we know what's going to happen. People are going to walk backwards, talk some gibberish, and then kill themselves for another 90 minutes. And we'll never explore the origins and the reason for the happening. Ultimately, it's an interesting but flawed story idea that creates enough trailer moments to get us interested to pay full price to see it in the theater, and then once our money's committed, we can't really do anything except sit there and say, how did I get suckered into this? And that might be a real happening that's going on right now, where the previews are kind of like the toxins that these plants were releasing in this movie. And these trailers show us these promising, interesting little segments of all these potentially great movies. But once we get in there, we discover that these wannabe hits are made out of pure shit. So be aware, make sure that your brain doesn't get overloaded by these visual toxins being released in the previews, and you don't get sucked into wasting your money. That's the current happening, the Hollywood happening, if you will. So as the credits roll, this score is really cool. I like the music in this movie. Thanks for hanging out. It's been an honor to spend a movie night with you. Hope it's been fun. And let's do it again. Every Tuesday is a new DVD release day. So once a week, let's get together and hang out. And just to say something final about M. Night Shyamalan, again, I'm a big fan of his and I want him to succeed. But if you look at his recent films, there are signs of weakness when it comes to the objectives in the stories and really fulfilling the genre expectations. The trailers really set us up for something exciting, and when you get into his films, you get disappointed. It focuses on characters that are a little underdeveloped and maybe not in the most interesting of relationships, and the genre elements that are promised in the trailer are never truly developed enough to be exciting and wow us and really make it worth our money. After doing a little research, it looks like M. Night has a project coming up in 2010 called The Last Airbender, which is based off of a Nickelodeon cartoon called Avatar: The Last Airbender, which ran for 3 seasons. So this will be an interesting change, and actually a much needed change for M. Night, because it really is the first time he's not writing an original screenplay. This will be the first time he's adapting something, previous source material. So hopefully that'll force him to get out of this comfort zone of being the man of mystery and twists and thrillers, and just tell a good solid story that builds momentum, keeps us interested, builds to a climax, and really delivers a solid, emotionally satisfying ending. Finally, I'd love to hear your feedback on the idea of movie nights, so please email me and let me know what you thought of this commentary. If there's anything that you'd like to see specifically in terms of a movie, please make a suggestion. And definitely don't pull any punches with your feedback. As long as it's constructive, I'm open to any and all thoughts. So the credits are coming to an end here, which means our time is done. So until next time, choose your movies wisely, and as always, long live good movies.